Hello, and welcome to the Frictionless Experience, the podcast where we lay waste to digital friction. I'm Chuck Moxley.
And I'm Nick Palladino.
Now, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about customer experience, what it is, what it isn't, and the confusion that persists about driving better customer experiences by removing friction from the purchase process. Joining us for this topic is a man recognized as one of the top 20 customer experience leaders in the world, Michael Hinshaw. Early in his career, Michael started a company and grew it to $300 million in just 3 years before selling it. He took the learnings from that and specifically how to drive better customer experiences, and now consults with a number of leading companies, including Intel, Cisco, Microsoft, Best Buy, Lululemon, Pfizer, and others to help them drive better customer experiences. He is also co-author of the best-selling book, Smart Customers, Stupid Companies, Why Only Intelligent Companies Will Thrive and How to Be One of Them. Michael is a pioneer in the customer experience world and spent his first 10 years explaining what it is and why it's important. Now everyone knows what it is, but many people describe it differently. Well, Michael's here to help us set the record straight, and we're excited to have him. Michael, welcome to the Frictionless Experience.
That's great, Chuck. Thanks for having me, Nick, as well. Looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. I love the name of your book, though. It's such a fun name. I mean, you're targeting businesses, yet you're calling them stupid. I love it. It's my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, that book's over 10 years old, and I wrote it thinking I better get it out there quickly because companies are going to figure this stuff out. Well, good news, bad news, they haven't.
That's true, and actually, you've got a new book coming out, which we will talk about. So, I guess they didn't figure it out. You told us a funny story in a prep call about a parking lot you encountered a few years ago. Do you want to share that story and how it paid off this idea of the confusion around what customer experience is?
Yeah, I was actually visiting a technology client here in the Bay Area that I will not name, but pulled up into their parking lot, and a bunch of spaces were open near the entrance of the building I was going into. And there's some signs in front of them. Usually, you look at the signs and say, I want to park here if it's a handicap spot, or maybe this is employee of the month, or right, you don't want to get in the wrong spot. And all these reserved spots were reserved. It said customer experience parking. And I had to ask myself, what is customer experience parking? And I mean, that's where I parked, obviously, because I figured, I do customer experience. This is obviously for me, although I don't think that's what it meant. But it's just an illustration of how different organizations look at customer experience, how they define it. I'm sure you've run into this. I was getting my tires changed a year or so ago, and the manager of the tire shop gave me his card. I looked at it and said, customer experience manager. And because he's the manager of the experience in the tire store. So he's absolutely 100% correct. That's what it is. But that being said,
that's very, very interesting when you really think about it, because it's basically who individually is defining customer experience on their own interpretation. Like, what is customer experience? Because what is a customer in the first place? And then what is the experience that you're targeting in the second place? So you need to actually be able to define these concepts and to just begin with in a meaningful way. And if you don't, then you're going to either miss the mark, or you're going to, I guess, get it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we talk about in customer experience is used broadly to describe, the industry that I'm in, the discipline of customer experience improvement, digital, human, in-person, et cetera. But customer experience actually lives between the ears of our customers. It's you can't box it, you can't package it, you can't sell it. It's perceptual. And if our customers believe the experience is horrible, by definition it is. If they think it's great, by definition it is. So the challenge that companies have is not actually customer experience, it's managing customer experience. What are the things that companies need to do to systematize, operationalize, et cetera, their ability to change how customers feel as a result of their experiences?
That's also very interesting. It's almost like you're battling the subconscious of the customer.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting way of looking at it. And you can affect it, though.
I just want to go back to customer experience parking actually sounds like a sentence. Customers experience parking every day.
But it should be
So
hyphenated.
Michael,
So
that's true. Exactly. Yeah. Or maybe a comma, So Michael, tell us about your journey to starting your consulting practice, how you got here, what experiences led you to championing customer experience, especially that founding story, which is very interesting.
yeah, so I won't spend much time on that, but my background is in design and marketing. And in the late 90s, I built and sold a small-ish brand strategy firm, about 30, 35 employees at the time I sold it. And decided to take a year off. And about halfway through that time, one of the clients that I had, private equity firm, gave me a call and said, "We're interested in starting something in this internet space. Are you interested in joining us? Do you want to run a company?" And I said, "Sure." And they said, "Well, we don't know what that means. So let's talk about, right? What is an internet? What should an internet company look like that we could invest in?" And long story short, we decided to start a grain trading business in Alberta, Canada. And just, I live in San Francisco. I did not spend much time in Canada. I went to art school for my master's, know nothing about grain. I do now, though. I mean, I didn't then. but but the way that I learned about that marketplace was to go in and essentially talk to everyone in the grain trading ecosystem. Talk to farmers, talk to agronomists, talked to inputs, sales folks like seed, fertilizer, things like that. The buyers, Sapporo, for example, one of the buyers, and mapped it all out so that I could see where the friction points were that were common across these various audiences. And then we designed a technology platform to eliminate those friction points, right? Frictionless experience. And even though it had been done a certain way for many, many years, it wasn't, there were things that we could do that were more efficient, that would solve more problems, and that we could have an exponential effect on the issues that our potential customers were having by digitizing. And long story short, worked out really well. We became the largest independent grain trader in Canada at that time. We had about 130,000 acres under management, where our agronomists managed farms to create differentiated wheat, essentially. And when the internet, crashed, if you will, the market did in the early 2000s, I took another year off. We sold the technology, took a year off, and then started M Corp CX. And that is a consulting business that I run. I'm the president founder, and smaller organization, 30, 35 people, about the same size as my last one. But have been only focused on customer and employee experience since we started. And do that for organizations of all sizes, types, and kinds. But it's really for me, it's a fascinating and interesting field, because not only do I help make customers' lives better, I also help companies make more money. So, and I make a living too. So win-win-win.
A triple win. I like it. So as we talked about in the introduction, the term customer experience is kind of confusing, defined by different people, different ways. What do you believe is the correct definition of customer experience? How would you define it?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to the comment that I made earlier about the experience living in our customers' minds. So the customer experience is the customer's perceptions and feelings and expectations built up as a result of all the interactions they have with a brand. Right? And those interactions can be direct, they can be proactive, they can be reactive, they can be in conversations they have with friends. It can be things they read, online, ratings or stories or etc. So that definition of the experience, that it's the sum total of the feelings customers have as a result of the experience, is, I was saying, can be managed by companies. So a customer experience management is probably a better way, in my opinion, to look at it from the company perspective.
Gotcha. It's so interesting because we've talked about in branding for years. I've given this speech 2 or 3 times or multiple times about brand isn't a logo, it's not a color, it's how you make customers feel, and it's a sum total of all of their interactions with you, positive, yep, negative, how they buy, what they hear on the internet or they see on TV, etc. All of that makes up a brand experience. So brand experience, customer experience kind of
Very similar.
two sides of the same coin in a way.
Yes.
And I think something that's really interesting to hear here, and going back to kind of my comment about subconscious, if you're in a conversation with somebody about a brand and that gives you a negative feeling about that brand, and then you need to go have an experience with that brand later, that subconscious of that conversation is going to kick right in, and you're going to inherently have a bad experience should anything go wrong whatsoever, because you've already been set up to say, hey, this is going to be a bad experience. That's an interesting
you're almost predisposed.
aspect. Yeah.
It's kind of like the company can set a different expectation. We our favorite sushi restaurant that we go to is one of those revolving sushis on the conveyor belt, and the service is god awful. It's the worst service you'll ever have in a restaurant, but we go all the time, and we go in with the expectation it's going to be bad service. In fact, we're surprised if they ever give us good service, because they've set an expectation that's consistent, at least.
So do you think your customer experience is good or bad there, Chuck?
That's a good question. The experience can be, oh man, that one's a tough one, because we love the conveyor belt. We love the convenience of the conveyor belt. We don't have to order and all that. So there are aspects of the experience that are superior to others and aspects that are inferior to others. Yeah. I guess net, it's enough to keep us bringing.
Yeah. And your expectations are met.
There it is.
Right. Because
when they're exceeded, it's a win, right?
Exactly. It's super interesting. So I know that you trademarked the term touchpoint mapping more than 2 decades ago. Tell us about this idea of touchpoint mapping and how the process has evolved over the last decade or so.
Yeah, it's interesting. So touch points in and of them. So mapping touch points is essentially a subset or an aspect of journey mapping. It's finding ways to identify all the interactions the customers have across channels and lay them out in a sequence, a journey map essentially, that allows you to see, as customers move from one stage of their relationship to another, what are the interactions that either accelerate or impede that movement. So we talk about kind of velocity, and touch points can get customers to move through a cycle more quickly. Can also get them to drop out of the cycle, or drop out of the journey, drop out of the relationship. But touch points don't occur by themselves. Individual touch points delivered exceptionally well don't always equate to a great customer experience, because customers interact with the company with a goal of accomplishing something. They want to buy something. They want to learn something. They have some objective, a job to be done, so to speak, that they want to figure out the answer to as they interact. And the touch points need to be arrayed in ways that seamlessly move your customer from one stage of their journey to the next in pursuit of their goal. So touch points live in journey stages, and journey stages roll up to a full customer journey that customers traverse as they try and accomplish something. And it can be, journeys can be by channel, just via digital. More often they're omni-channel. They cross multiple types of interactions. And you can also look at the customer journey from the end-to-end perspective, the entire life cycle of the customer over time. So they roll up a lot of different ways.
And how do you use that in a consulting assignment, the touch points piece of it? So it's at the very lowest level. How do you use those to remove friction, for example, in the experience?
Yeah, see, essentially it's finding the spots where touch points create, and again, you broadcast a frictionless experience. There are interactions that, like, I'll give you a simple example that we all, I think, run into. I know that I do. You ever called like a major service provider, like a cell phone company or cable, and what's the first thing when you get that automated voice response system? What's the first thing you run into?
I press zero.
Trying to get to an agent.
I press zero every single time.
Yeah, just like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. And they fight you on it. They fight you and don't want you to get to an agent.
They do. Because they want you to put in your, to get to the point where you can press the zeros, you got to put in your account information or your phone number or some kind of personal data that in theory would allow them to serve you better on the other end. But you get into the voice tree, you put your identifying information in there, you hit a bunch of buttons, you press zero a half dozen times, finally you get to a person, and what's the first thing that person asks you?
Who are you?
Your name, your account number, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like, wait a minute, I just I just gave you that. What is wrong with you? Right? So that's a perfect example of a touch point that we all encounter, and that, I mean, makes me nuts, because I know that either the company is willfully ignorant, they don't care about me because obviously they're wasting my time and my energy, when in reality they probably just have back end systems that aren't connected, and they really haven't had the time or the budget or the priority to fix that kind of stuff. But to your point, Chuck, we identify specific instances like that where touch points exist that either are doing a great job, so you don't do anything to it, that need to be modified, like the example I just gave needs to be changed in a way that makes it more effective, more efficient. Like, don't make people put their number in. If you got to keep the voice tree, great, but don't do that up front. Or sometimes there's places where customers get stuck. They might go skirt across a series of interactions with the company, and the next step isn't obvious. So you need to include a new touch point. So you can modify touch points, eliminate touch points, or create new touch points. And from a consulting perspective, you look at the degree to which those interactions positively and negatively affect customers' perceptions, and essentially change the ones you need to, put new ones in where they're missing, and eliminate those that are redundant. Another example, worked for a large telecom, and they were working with small businesses, and in the installation process, it was for high-speed cable for small business. So I went through this entire process, and after the installation was done, the installer wrote down like the special code on a piece of paper and gave it to the business owner and said, "This is important. Don't lose it. This is your identifiable information. Somebody can get into your system with this. So just here it is. Deal done. Signed, sealed." 2 weeks later, the phone company sends out a mailing, right? And this mailing would send out, they're doing thousands and thousands of these all over the country, hundreds of thousands. And in that mailing, the intent was to provide a backup for the code, the password that the installer had given them. And so marketing's like, well, we're sending this thing anyhow. Why don't we send them, this flyer, that flyer, this other information? And we're doing our research and found out that the business owners, when they got this, they were so upset. They were angry. They were like, I can't believe that this company is putting my personal password in the mail as an excuse to send all this marketing crap.
I feel that is something that bothered the heck out of me with anything dealing with like your mortgage, right? As soon as you get a statement with your mortgage, when you first get one, you're getting loaded up with all these like mortgage insurance, and we can insure your home. It's all just advertisements loaded into what should have just been the end of the transaction.
Yep. And that's the kind of thing it actually doesn't accomplish the goal. And so in this instance, we said, okay, that's an eliminate. And they've saved something like $5 million a year eliminating that one touch point, and they improve customer satisfaction. Boom. Right?
Win-win. That's amazing. I had experience with Amazon, of all companies. That Amazon does everything great until you have a problem. That's been my experience. And when you have a problem, you can't get to a person, you have to chat. Yeah. And I had a problem, and the chat kept timing out. They would have to go research it. They go, well, this is a problem. I go, nope, you guys have tried that. That's not the problem, blah, blah, blah. And they go, okay, one moment. It would time out, and it would hand me over to another chat agent because I had timed out. So then I'd have to start the whole thing over again. And it was like 3 or 4 times in a row in a single chat that it kept getting handed to another agent, because they'd get stumped at one point. They'd go try to research, and then they'd lose the thing, and it would start over. Never did get a result.
Oh, that's at least better than a timeout resulting in a severed call. And then you have to call back in and start again. Then you're just getting pissed off every time.
That's true. Like, well, this is digital chat. So
my wife was on the phone with someone the other day. I forget who she was calling, but I heard her saying, all right, just up front, so you know, I've been cut off 3 times. I'm really pissed. Sorry you got me. I know it's not your fault, but I need help.
and I'm not starting at a good point here.
No, just up front, full disclosure, I am unhappy.
That's funny. So one of the topics that we've talked about multiple times now on the podcast is this concept of phygital, how digital experiences often become physical experiences, for example, in the last mile of the transaction. Like
Yes.
you order an appliance online, but you still have to deliver it. Do you have any stories from any of the companies you've worked with that where they had digital experiences and how that touch point map kind of worked into that, improving that experience and uncovered revenue opportunities?
Yeah, it's so I can give part of a story. Working with a large retailer um, in the appliance space specifically, there's the in-store experience was great. This organization, and I'm not going to name names unless it's not a company I do work with. But in this instance, there was a real a great in-store experience, a great digital experience. So on the front end of the process, tightly linked, great connection, a lot of clarity around being able to find and research a product online, come into the store, and then have conversations with intelligent agents internally who are able to help this person solve the problems they need to solve. Great, using your taxonomy, digital experience on the front end, but the back end of that last mile, it's like you'd like to think that once you buy the appliance in the store, that you're done. But appliances in particular, right? You need to have those appliances delivered. In many cases, you have to have those appliances installed. And oftentimes things come up as you're going through installation. So in this particular instance, they had a really high dissatisfaction rate and a significant return rate because there wasn't clarity or connection between the customer's in-home situation, like stove, for example. Will it fit? What are the things that you have to get from the customer up front to make that delivery experience seamless and the installation experience seamless? And they're just missing a set of interactions up front that would allow the delivery team to more effectively get that product into the house. Does it fit through the door? Right? I mean, right? And make sure that once installed, that it actually fit in the place the customer had in mind. So again, a relatively simple fix. What are the questions that we need to ask our customers for different products to help them understand what it is that they need to tell us so we can make sure that the product works for them? It's not just something that the customer likes. It has all the right features. It has to actually fit into the space, and it has to be fit for purpose, so to speak. And satisfaction went up, installations improved, returns reduced. Again, relatively small thing, but being able to identify where the problem existed instead of just saying, "Oh man, this customer," right? Why didn't they tell us how big their door was? I mean, why would they know? So expectations, right? The delivery folks had expectations that weren't met because the customers weren't being asked the right questions up front. The delivery guys weren't getting the information.
I had a very relevant experience, but I'm pretty sure I was actually told to measure the door to get into the house. But what I wasn't told to measure was the path to get to the kitchen. And so I bought this refrigerator, and the refrigerator was just too wide to get through anything. And it could get into the house easily because the front door was big enough, but it couldn't get into the kitchen door. And I didn't consider it. I didn't think about it. So it's very interesting to hear you talking through that process, and how do you take it to the next level to be able to say, like, all the way through into the kitchen without just coming across as being whiny or redundant.
No, as customers, we see things all the time and go, what is this company thinking? Right? Like, I'll give you an example. I'll use my wife as an example again. We wanted to buy new chairs for our dining room, and we've got 8 chairs around the dining room table. And she went online and tried to purchase individual chairs. Right? She says, I want to buy one of these chairs, but I want to see it in my house first. But they only sold them in sets. So she bought 6 sets of chairs, 6 sets of 8 chairs, right? 48 chairs. The delivery guy pulls up in our driveway and he says, "Where do you want all the chairs?" My wife said, "Hold on, give me that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one." Brought them all in the house and said, "Oh, this one's really nice. Bring the other 7 that match this and take the rest back." And the guy's like, "Take them back?"
Oh my gosh.
Denied the
That's
delivery. That's
Just denied the
amazing.
entire delivery. I was like, that was brilliant.
I was thinking the same thing. Your wife is brilliant. What a great idea.
I mean,
Although it
but
cost them a fortune, but
what kind of back end system wouldn't? It's like we have no ability to, and we're selling digitally, right? This is an online environment. You can't go into the store, and if you could go into a store, you can't tell what it's going to look like in your environment. So you'd think that would be a common use case, right? I thought people must do this stuff all the time, or people just get upset because they can't do it. They didn't think to order 48 chairs, and they just went someplace else and did it. So this company lost business.
Well, Apple thinks they solved this problem with the Vision Pro, right? Because you'll throw that thing on and then you'll be able to look and see the chair sitting in your house.
Yeah, you
They
probably
think
run
they
into the
solved
wall
it.
while you're doing it. So
it seems to me that they could have put some logic in their software to go, somebody's ordering 48 chairs very similar. I bet they don't actually need 48 chairs to prevent that, because that had to be very costly to deliver and return
no, it was
42 or whatever the.
and she's never shopped at that store again. She said, you know what? That was just so stupid. I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
You know?
That's interesting. Back on the case of the refrigerator where you said they had to collect that information up front, did you add that into the digital process when they were placing the order? Did you do it was there a phone call from the service team
It was
prior
a
to delivery?
digital process and validation of the digital process prior to delivery. Right? Do we have all the information we need? So they used to have a double check in there.
Gotcha. And you talked about the cost impact on the company or the benefit.
Yeah.
Did that actually get quantified? Like what that change saved them in terms of loyalty, in terms of fewer canceled orders?
So a lot of times, so the short answer is yes, but the business case for making those changes is pretty clear, right? And we're able to essentially build out. We actually call them, business cases or cost rationalization, where you say, okay, if we're spending this much money, we're able to deflect this many returns, and we're able to reduce the amount of trips that, like, if somebody buys something it doesn't fit, they have to maybe change it. So they have to do 2 trips back and forth. The customer has to do something. So if you look at all the deliveries, the number of issues that you have, you can actually quantify it up front. But what most organizations don't do is after the fact, take the time and energy to actually validate that and prove it out over time. So typically it's a break fix rather than we're going to track how much money this saved us over X period of time. So you build it out and project it up front. That being said, to the value question, one of the biggest challenges in customer experience that most companies have is actually tracking value over time. So that's a huge gap and an important one from our perspective for companies to try and fix.
It doesn't give them the ability then to quantify when there's a problem, when there's friction, what that cost to them is, because they haven't quantified the positive side of it. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. Okay. I mean, there's a way to track, and so I semi-jokingly say that improving customer experience isn't simple, but it is straightforward. And value modeling of any kind is kind of the same way. It's not simple because it requires data, but it's pretty simple to try and figure out what you need to do. You need to, have data that tells you what you're doing to your customers, what emails you're sending, what phone calls you're having, what digital channels are they interacting with, when, why, and how. And then you bump that up against the touch points, right? So your channels, your infrastructure is delivering experiences at touch points. Those touch points roll up to journeys. Those journeys roll up to customer feelings. Those feelings cause customers to behave in certain ways. They feel good, they buy more. They feel bad, they leave, simplistically. And those are business objectives. So you can directly link what you do digitally and physical, any other way, all the way up to a business result, positive or negative, and you can automate that. But it requires the ability to bring data in consistently and have a listening system that flags those positive, that flags negative experiences, both at an individual level. So if you piss one customer off, you got to fix it for that individual customer. But what's really interesting is that when companies track this, they realize they're fixing things individually for customers hundreds of times, the same thing. It's
Mm.
like, oh, well, actually, if we're able to look at the 100 times we're fixing it for 100 customers, if we actually fix the process, we're going to eliminate that problem, and we're going to save ourselves a ton of energy because we got our customer service reps or whoever is going through heroic efforts every day to solve the same problem for a different customer. So,
Interesting. Yeah, it takes that ability to roll all that up, the macro and the micro into a macro
yeah.
picture. So I know you often say digital first, but not digital only. Tell us more about your beliefs here and why you strongly encourage this thought process within the companies you work with.
Yeah. Chuck, I'm going to go to your Amazon example, right? So you're digital first, but when there's a problem, you needed to talk to somebody. So digital first, not digital only, essentially means that none of us want to talk to a person until we do, and then we want to talk to someone right away. and and a lot of organizations, like back to the example of putting the code in, right, and trying to make it hard for you to actually connect with somebody. If you're able to deliver digital experiences that solve most of your customers' problems and deliver against their expectations, you're going to reduce your cost of service delivery. But if you make it too hard for your customers to solve their problems, then you're going to, not only increase your cost of service, you're going to upset your customers.
Gotcha. Do you have any examples in your consulting where you encountered this? You were able to quantify that and then get that shift into this new framework?
I don't have one that like jumps to mind. So yeah, the short answer is yes, but I'm trying to think of a specific example and one's not popping into my head.
That's fine. That's fine. We can move on. We'll just cut out that question completely.
Okay.
So what companies do you take inspiration from that consistently create frictionless experiences that you've either observed as a consumer or with your consulting practice?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and this is going to be a standard answer. Like I haven't had that particular experience with Amazon. Amazon, for me, does a pretty good job delivering a frictionless experience, right? And they're brought up a lot as examples inside organizations. And one of the reasons I think that they're in general better than most companies at doing that is because they have been built around the customer from day one. And I don't know if you've ever read their first shareholder letter of shareholders from Jeff Bezos. I think it was 97. It's a really interesting read. It basically talks about the fact that customers are more important to them than anything, and that they're going to continue improving to deliver great experiences to their customers. And every shareholder letter since that time basically says, and reread the 1990s, reread the first shareholder letter, because that's still really important to us. And there's an apocryphal tale that there's an empty chair purposely in meetings at Amazon where decisions are made that could affect customers. And the theory is that that empty chair is there to visualize a customer there in the room. If there was a customer here listening to us have this conversation, make this decision, what would they say? No company gets it right all the time. I'll just say that up front. I've never dealt with a company that never gets it wrong. But the ability to recover when you do get it wrong has a huge difference, right? You can have a relationship with a customer, and if you blow it and you pick it up and fix it, which obviously Amazon didn't in your case, the resulting loyalty is typically stronger than if you'd never created a problem. I teach at UC Berkeley, which is a university here in California, at their business school. And I was in a conversation with students a week before last, and it's called the peak end theory, right? There's a point in the journey where it's like really important you get it right, a moment of truth, or it's one of the ways to describe it. And how you feel at the end of that journey is also critical. So you got to get the key points right, and you got to get the end of the journey right when the goal is accomplished. And we're talking about that recovery factor. And one of the students said, well, couldn't we just plan to screw a customer over in one spot in the experience and then have a system in place to recover incredibly well? And wouldn't that give us stronger relationships? And, it's one of the reasons I love teaching, because I was like, that's kind of brilliant. maybe that's something we could package.
That's
funny.
Hilarious.
I think there was a study done by Harvard Business School years ago on that, of how that a customer with a bad experience has an even better perception. I never thought about creating problems, but that's an interesting take.
Yeah, I thought that's a fresh thought.
So you have a new book coming out. Tell us about that and what you'll be talking about in the book.
Yeah. So the book is called Experience Rules, and it's Experience Rules. It's the Experience Operating System, the XOS, and 8 keys to enable it. My co-author Diane Majors and I have been working on this for a year or so. Diane is a former head of customer experience at AT&T and at Cisco Foods, and has been a customer experience consultant for many years since then. And she's a former CEO and chair of the Customer Experience Professionals Association. And so she and I, separately really recognize there are a lot of things that companies do to improve experiences. But what they don't have is typically clear line of sight to how all these things fit together across an organization. And we kind of make the case for the difference between an operating models in companies tend to put barriers in place, or boxes, if nothing else. Like, here's the marketing box, here's the sales box, and here's how they kind of fit together. But a system is more seamless. It's more about ways of thinking and working. It's about ways of connecting all parts of the organization, like sales, marketing, legal, et cetera, around customer journeys, around customer experiences. So the goal is to create great experiences for your customers as a company, not just great experiences within your channel. So this book essentially lines out the things that you can do as an organization, the kinds of questions that you need to ask to put that system in place.
And that system is what you call a customer experience operating system?
Yeah, that's the XOS, the Experience Operating System.
Operating System.
And it's things that companies do already. It's not like news that you need to have strategy and a vision on where you're going for customers. It's not news that you have to listen to and understand your customers, or that you have to measure the experiences they have. But how they all fit together is something that a lot of organizations have a hard time doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you have to map. Yeah, XOS sounds very, very. I'd be very curious what the system is in place that it looks like when you actually start to instrument a healthy XOS, because to me, I'm not quite yet visualizing exactly what that means to create that good system.
Yeah, and that's back to it's not simple. Right? And it isn't. I mean, the data, right? You need to have free access or access to the right data to help you make decisions. If you can't measure the experiences you have with your customers, you can't improvement. If you don't understand your customers, you can't design new innovative experiences, product, services that are going to meet their needs. And all those things have to fit together. You can't have measurement in one part of the company, innovation in another part of the company, customer research in another part of the company. And we see this all the time in big organizations. There's silos built up that are difficult for the organization to traverse because each silo has its own set of what we call WIFMs, like what's in it for me. And as in marketing, right, the WIFMs are pretty clear. We need to get more people, their eyes on brand, engaged with brand up front so they'll buy something. Sales is like, well, we need to close it, right? That's our job is to close this thing. Services, to depending on who you talk to, is to catch all the what that rolls downhill from the sales and marketing promises that are unmet when someone becomes a customer. But if you look at it across all of those things with the goal of how do we line all this stuff up in ways that benefit our customers specifically, then those silos start to knock down. And a big part of the operating system is finding ways to knock those silos down. And it takes time because it's a cultural shift. It's changing ways of thinking and working. It's not just saying, okay, we're going to be customer centric now. Let's flip the switch and go in this direction. It's moving everyone in the organization from point A to point B and doing so over time.
Yeah. And if you aren't doing this with a good system, then you're inherently going to be developing and building in a direction that is not necessarily aligned with your customers, which gets to another concept that Chuck loves to make fun of me for bringing up all the time, called product bias, which is basically to say that you're building with your own bias and you are understanding your own systems and your own opinions. But if you can elevate that message and you can start talking about it in your customer's direction and make sure that you're doing it with a data-driven approach, then in theory that your XOS is working to your advantage to make sure you're in that line.
I mean, it's a hard shift for, because when you're working in a company, you have goals and companies sets all, it doesn't matter if you're a early stage startup or you're a multinational global behemoth. systems are in place to make it easier for you to do business and easier for you to make money. But oftentimes those systems aren't designed with the customer's needs in mind. And that mindset shift is thinking about, instead of thinking about what do I need to do in my business, and making that mental shift that says, what do our customers need to do when they interact with our business? What are they trying to accomplish? How can I make it easier for them? That mental shift essentially that takes that product bias you're talking about and moves it aside, because you're not doing it based on your perspective and your opinion. You're doing it based on your customer. I heard a stat, it's a number of years old now, but I think it was that 70 some odd percent of, and this is another HBR article from, a ways back, but 70 some odd percent of decisions that are made in companies that affect customers are done without any data about customers. Exactly your point. Right? So it's like, when I read that, I was like, wait, what? But it's unsurprising because, like, well, I've been selling this stuff for years, so I know what's going on. We need to do this. So it's gut instead of data. It's your perception versus customer's need. It's a big mindset shift, and that's the part that's straightforward. You got to change people's minds. Oh, that's not simple.
Well, and that same lack of data can cause people not to act, right? Because they have this belief it's not a problem, and they don't have data necessarily to support it. I'm curious if you've had that where you've gone in, identified some sort of friction point, but you couldn't build a case for it to get executive level buy-in to spend whatever's going to cost to fix it.
Okay, I got a great story for that.
Okay.
I was talking to the CEO of a large regional bank, I think it was, and it was part of a discovery around a consulting engagement to really understand where leadership's head was at and what leadership was thinking. And I asked him, do you have a customer experience vision, or do you have clarity on what it is you want to offer your customers and what that means to your customers? He said, absolutely, completely. I said, can you describe it to me? He said, yeah, it's all about making the experience better for our customers, and making the experiences valuable for them, and some other unclear, non-specific feedback. There's a poster on the wall behind him, behind his desk, right? This is the CEO's office, corner suite, big shot guy, wood walls, nicely framed poster that had, this is our customer experience promise. This is our promise to customers, something like that. And it listed them out. And I was looking at it, I said, is that it? And he goes, yeah, we all buy into that completely. It's like, okay.
we buy into it. We just can't tell you what it is unless we look at the poster.
I have no idea what it is, but I'm behind it.
That's funny.
So they're a perfect example, right? They didn't think there was a problem, but it was pretty easy to come in and say, well, actually, so
that's a lot like core values in a company sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, they're related, right? Because if your core values aren't based around your customer, if your customers aren't even mentioned in your core values, which we've also seen, or in your mission, or in your vision, or in your strategy, then it's pretty hard to get the organization to pivot towards your customers, because it's not something that your people think is important. Your people got to come with you.
Yep. Your mention of the department silos too, it reminds me, and Nick, I can't remember, it was a guest recently who made the comment, the problem is nobody owns delivering a frictionless experience, and yet everybody owns it, right? Everybody owns a piece of it, but there's no one overall owner of that process.
Yeah. I remember making the comment. I even remember the short, but I'm drawing a blank on the guest as well, but that's definitely something that's really important, because everybody has their own part of creating the good customer experience, and you need to own it. But what's more important than owning your own part is making sure where you are intertwined with other organizations, other teams within the large organization, I should say. You need to make sure that those gears are moving together, because so often you'll see that you'll work in a silo, and we could use a very overt example where you have the homepage team that functionally is a different team than the product team, than the checkout team. And if that happens, then the transition is not going to feel quite as concise in that digital journey. And so by owning that customer experience, even if my part's that product part, I need to make sure that that transition from home to product is very seamless and organic and makes sense for my customers. Now that's a very digital focused experience, but Michael, I'm sure you have a
Well,
good
the concept
analogy.
applies to any type of experience or any combination of channels. I mean, digital experiences, that's how most of us experience brands initially anyhow, unless it's, retail, of course, things like that, very consumer focused brands. But in general, we do research online, we buy online, organizations deliver messages to us online and digitally. So digital is by far the biggest channel by volume, by number of interactions. But to your point around ownership, we flip that. We say when everyone's in charge, no one's in charge. Right? But it's the same exact message as your guest, and it is the chief executive ultimately has the ultimate responsibility for making sure the organization's focused. But one of the things that we've seen be highly effective is essentially, we call it alignment and accountability. It used to be called governance, but that's kind of the G word, right? No one likes to talk about governance because everyone likes rules as long as they apply to somebody else. I don't need rules, but you guys sure do. So, but the alignment and accountability piece of it is actually where an organization, they set that top level vision. They say, these are the things we're going to promise our customers. We're always going to deliver relevant, personalized, frictionless experiences. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean in every part of our organization? How do we know when an experience is relevant or not? We need to understand our customers and measure it. What does personalized mean? No, personalized doesn't mean an email that says "Dear Bob," right? There's a lot more to it than that. But so you define that in every single part of the organization, and you make it clear. You articulate this is what it means at the top of the house. And Chuck used the example of brand. It's very much like brand architecture, right? You start at the top. What is our experience at the high level, and then how does that translate to different parts of the organization, and how do different parts of the organization communicate and work with each other to accomplish that? And it also needs to go down to every single part of the company, so that it's not just it's not just customer service or sales or digital, that it's folks in the warehouse or legal or accounting. I mean, have you ever gotten a bill from a company? You look at the bill, you go, what are they charging me for?
Yes.
Or contracts, or say, what am I signing up for? I have no idea what this means. And you talk to lawyers or accountants or finance folks and organizations. They're like, we don't deal with customers. It's like, no, but you sure affect them. so you need to think about that as you're working through these processes.
So, Michael, what is something that people get wrong about driving frictionless digital experiences? A widely held belief about the digital experience that you fundamentally disagree with?
Oh, that's so tech doesn't solve everything. in my right, I have seen time and time again companies say, we know this is an issue, but we're solving it by contracting with pick your major global digital experience provider, and that's going to fix it. And it's like, well, actually what that's going to do is make your poor experiences faster. And it's going to piss your customers off more, because you're going to run them through the process that you did ineffectively over here in the new digital, or they bring a digital platform in and expect the vendor partner to set it all up properly. The digital part of the sales guys, their job is to sell the software, right? Once the contract's signed, they're out. And I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way, because right, they're incented to sell the software. And typically, a software is set up with a bunch of standardized systems and standardized information in it. But organizations need to work with their technology partners to make sure that the technology is customized for them, because aligning it to their processes in the best interest of customers is as important, and I'd argue even more work than getting that digital tech in the first place.
Yeah, that sounds so familiar for me. I mean, we even talked about it. Speeding up a site isn't always good for your customers. It's good for your customers when the experience was good in the first place. Just like you're saying, this is something that came up in our Kinney episode, which released a few months back now.
So, Michael, what are 2 to 3 final recommendations for listeners they can apply in their own roles to drive more frictionless digital experiences?
Yeah, I'd say the At the individual level, probably the first thing is think about what your customers want or need as they're interacting with you or with your company in the area that you're responsible for. It's just that mental pivot, thinking about what do they want, what can I do that's going to affect them positively, rather than just doing your job. And the second thing is, while you're doing that, think about, when I mentioned their needs. It's their needs from an emotional perspective. It's the empathy question. What's going on with them, right? What are they trying to do? How do they feel in that moment, whatever that moment is? Like, I'll give you an example. Organization has warehouses. There's warehousemen. They put stuff in boxes and they ship the boxes out. If their mental model for the job is, I got to put stuff in boxes and ship it out, that's great. You can measure that as good throughput. But if your job is to ensure that the thing that you're shipping to your customers delights them when they open it and it's the right thing, that's just a mindset shift. And it's something that anybody in any company can do. And the other thing I suggest is work across channels like your customers do. Not everyone in every company can do this, but you can actually interact with and connect with folks who are in your organization and might be adjacent to you, or maybe it's part of that journey where they're the step ahead. Get to know the folks who are affecting your customers' experience. And we see this kind of grassroots conversations take place all the time and end up, driving big change, where people kind of create ad hoc, teams, if you will, around serving customers better. It doesn't take much at that grassroots level.
That's awesome. Great conversation, Michael. Where can listeners find you?
I'm at mcorp.cx. That's mcorp.cx. On LinkedIn, Michael Hinshaw. And our book, Experience Rules, is on Amazon. So there's Experience Rules, ! And Hinshaw or Majors, that's Magers. And I also just want to say, if any of your listeners have a question or want to connect with me, I love chatting about this stuff. Obviously, it's a passion of mine, has been for quite a long time. So just happy to connect. Please reach out. I'd love to meet.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Michael. And thanks for tuning into this episode of The Frictionless Experience. Remember to follow us on your favorite podcast player app so you automatically receive a notification when we upload new episodes. And be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast, and also let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. We're happy to cover anything that might be causing you friction. And of course, you can always find and connect with me and Nick on LinkedIn.